I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Roll call, Dennis Bender.
Here.
Donna Davis.
Here.
Maria Okpara. Rick Rowley. Wilson Sell.
Here.
All
Okay.
present.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments. Kaylee, do we have any public comments today?
We do. We have a few that came in. They did not indicate the section that they belong to, but based on the content and personnel, I believe it should be appropriate to be read prior to closed session.
Okay.
The first one states, regarding Officer Carl Willis, School Police. Carl and I first met at a SAR hearing over 20 years ago. At that time, I was employed with the Apple Valley Fire Protection District, and the fire chief, Bart Lewis, allowed me the privilege of being a panel member while on duty. Over these years, I have had the opportunity to see how Carl interacts with family members and their truant children. Many of them are angry, frightened about the SAR process, or even homeless. In many cases, Carl has had to locate these families to deliver the subpoena. During that time, he would reassure them of the help available and the benefits of the SARB hearing. Because of his kind, respectful manner, these parents appeared before the panel and were helped by all the resources available. Having Carl at the hearings was also reassuring to all the panel members because he had a way of calming and diffusing situations. Also, the families were reassured seeing Carl there because they had already interacted with him and he had made them feel at ease. At my last SARB hearing in 2019, the panel was informed that Carl would no longer be the school police officer delivering the subpoenas, issuing citations, and attending the hearings. He is such a benefit to the SARB process. Taking him from this position just seems so very wrong. I believe that Carl is a man of character who wears his school police uniform with pride. He gives all respect, therefore gaining respect in turn. Respectfully submitted, Rita Gay, SAR panel member.
Thank you. Let's see, next.
I have a few more.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
My name is Emmett Tucker. I have been a resident of Apple Valley my entire life. I have coached for many years for HCYSL and STORM. I am writing on behalf of my good friend, Carl Willis. My daughter is going to be 14 this month. As you may know, girls are delicate to the world, and the world can be a cruel place. I have always felt comfortable knowing my daughter is safe at school with Willis around. He has always given me tips on school safety for her and advice on what I can do and what she can do. This man has been a huge help to our kids at every school. Taking away someone who cares about kids more than most would be a mistake. I wish there were more people like him in this world. I am against Willis being moved out of the school patrol 100%. We need him right where he is. Thank you. The next comment is from Jasmine Gonzalez. To whom this may concern, Carl Willis is a pillar in the Apple Valley community. Mr. Willis has always brought a sense of security to all those around him. I have personally known Mr. Willis for over 20 years. He is not only one of the most professional men that I have ever known, but also one who pours nothing but compassion and love into his job and community. Community is defined as a feeling of fellowship with others, as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. This definition is exactly what Mr. Willis brings to the people of Apple Valley. He is a person who is not only well-liked, but also very much respected in the Apple Valley community. Having someone that is so respected does nothing but help the people of Apple Valley feel as if they are safer. Safer with someone who is familiar, more comfortable with someone they have grown up with, and happier knowing that my daughter, along with my nieces and nephews, are growing up in a community that is loved and protected by officers such as Mr. Willis. He has helped me and my family on many occasions. When he is called on, he comes with no hesitation. He goes out of his way for his community, and it shows through the amount of people that he is admired by throughout Apple Valley. It is rare to find any person that has worked in a field for as long as Mr. Willis has and still shows up every day happy and willing to work. This only comes when you find your true calling. It only happens when you love the work that you do. Mr. Willis loves the work that he does, and it shows. It shows to every person that has had the pleasure of crossing paths while he wears that uniform. Growing up, I have always admired the man Mr. Willis is. He is a man of integrity. His character speaks for itself. I am thankful for Mr. Willis and all of his services he has given to Apple Valley. Jasmine Gonzalez. The next comment is from Lisa Gonzalez. I have known Mr. Willis for nearly 30 years. In this time, I have known him as a father, coach to my children, an officer, and as a dear friend. As a father, he has brought up two respectful and well-rounded young men. As a coach to my children, he has demonstrated patience and encouraged the boys to always give their best on and off the playing field. He has passed down to my children and many others lesson in sports and in life that I hope they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. I see Mr. Willis all over Apple Valley in his uniform, exuding professionalism and the utmost respect for each person that he encounters. He is a positive role model for many children, for my children and grandchildren, who light up when they see Mr. Willis wearing that uniform proudly. As a friend, Mr. Willis is so genuine and always willing to lend a hand when is needed. There has never been a time that I have personally reached out to Mr. Willis and he has not gone above and beyond for myself or my family. I have never come across a person who had anything negative to say about Mr. Willis. I have never heard him use any kind of foul language. I have never heard him speak ill of anyone. He is the epitome of a man with integrity. Lisa Gonzalez. The next comment is from Alex Gonzalez Sr. To whom it may concern, Carl is one of the most respectable persons I've met. I have personally known Carl for 23 years. He has remained the same nice and kind man through and through. From what I have seen throughout the years, Carl takes great pride in his job and family. Carl's son played sports with my son growing up and sometimes was their coach. I can assure everyone that Carl is the kind of man you want around and protecting the children of the school district. Carl's respectfulness, character, and integrity is unmatched. He never raises his voice or reacts off of anger, and that is an important characteristic to have in an officer. Whenever Carl sees me and my family, he never fails to properly greet us and make my wife and kids feel welcomed. I truly feel from the bottom of my heart that Carl is everything the public should look for in a police officer and role model. Sincerely, Alex Gonzalez Sr. The next comment is from Linda Gibson. Hello, board members. I am writing this letter on behalf of Carl Willis, Transportation Safety. In reflecting on the past 13 years of working with Carl, I know one thing that stands out in my mind, and that is that he is always a gentleman. We worked very closely at the district police department. I feel strongly that he is a fine example of an excellent employee, one who is at work every day and greets everyone he comes in contact with in a positive manner. He is always pleasant in his speech and never fails to have an encouraging word or something positive to say. Carl's work ethics are always above the norm, whether he is handling his bus routes or working with families who are struggling getting children to school. He has dealt with some of the angriest parents at these stops and also those who were angry in regards to being served subpoenas for the SAR program at their front doors. In both instances, Carl was such a light to the district, keeping a firm but empathetic attitude to solve almost every situation. If the solution wasn't easy, Carl found a way by calling on other district resources that the district offers. He didn't just drop the ball. He went the extra mile and gave his all to lend a helping hand in whatever the task was. The reason I am writing this is to help the board decide on whether or not to reinstate Carl's job title, his pay increases, and equipment necessary to perform his duties. I am convinced that in the future, when school does reopen, that the district will want and need his expertise, especially in SAR matters, to keep the program running smoothly and to help families who have special needs that Carl has experience with. He has become a well-known district employee in his community, and families do appreciate his expertise and caring personality. Thank you for your time. Linda Gibson, retired school police coordinator. The next comment is from Virginia Baron. Dear AVUSD Board of Education, I first met Carl Willis while I was the Family Center Director at Phoenix Academy, Mojave Mesa, in 2007. During my tenure at Phoenix Academy, Carl always was a constant and helpful safety officer. He would sometimes drop by the Family Center and say hello to the families, or he would come by during release time after school and greet the families and students. He was a friendly face that parents and students could talk to in the Phoenix Academy community. During my tenure at AVUSD, I was also a member of SARB. Carl was always professional and courteous to everyone, including SARB members and families. He would always keep us updated on what he might have discovered out about a family or student when he delivered the subpoena. He has a genuine concern for students and families and will help whenever it's possible. Carl is always professional, courteous, and helpful in whatever capacity his job directs him. I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to work with somebody like Carl. It made my job so much easier working with families that Carl could represent the best of AVUSD. Sincerely, Virginia. The next comment is from Michael Barrow. To the AVUSD board, my name is Michael L. Barrow. I have had the privilege of knowing and having frequent interactions with Officer Carl Willis on a professional basis for the past 18 years. I am currently a special education high school teacher for the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. I have served as a special educator with SBCSS for the past 19 years. During that tenure, I also spent 5 years as an interim special education principal, supervising and working at a variety of special education classroom sites located within 7 school districts, including AVUSD, located throughout the high desert region. I have observed and directly interacted with Officer Willis during his law enforcement assignments with AVUSD as a safety officer, truant officer, and police officer. He has assisted me and other SBCSS educational staff, including administration staff, during countless problems and crisis situations involving the students that we serve throughout the past 18 years. His extensive knowledge of best practices for diffusing crisis situations, providing law enforcement support, and continually developing positive relationships with students and families throughout the high desert region has been invaluable. He has always displayed a high professional, courteous, and most of all, relatable, friendly pattern of interactions with school professionals, students, families, and the general population of citizens in our region. Everyone seems to know Officer Willis, holding him in high esteem. I have personally only heard very positive comments and statements about his personality, character, generosity, and personalized service to our community. Officer Willis is an individual who presents an excellent example and image of what law enforcement support and dedicated service should be in the high desert or anywhere else in our country. Sincerely, Michael L. Barrow. The next comment is from Martine Gonzalez. To whom it may concern, growing up, Mr. Willis was a coach, a family friend, but more importantly, he was a perfect example of what a man should be. He was patient and kind. He always greeted me with a smile. His hand always stretched out to give me a handshake when I got to go in for a big hug. He always treated me with respect and humility. He is the kind of person that genuinely cares about every person that he encounters. I had the pleasure of having him as a football and basketball coach. He wasn't a coach that yelled and cursed. He was the kind that encouraged every kid, no matter who it was. He never tore you down and always built you up. He was the kind of coach that every parent wants for their kid. I don't have a single negative memory of Mr. Willis. I have known this man for 21 years, and he has always been a man of integrity. It's hard to come by people that are as genuinely good as Mr. Willis has been in all these years. I am happy to say that he is someone that I looked up to and have had the pleasure of knowing throughout these years. Martine Gonzalez. The next comment is from Alice Wright. Carl Willis has been excellent in servicing the needs of Apple Valley for many years in his role as safety officer, truant officer, and police officer, and has been instrumental in getting to know his community. He has always presented himself in a professional, calm, soft-spoken, yet stern manner in my observance of handling kids and incidents throughout Apple Valley. I truly would like to see him continue in the police capacity as a positive role model figure that is definitely needed in this day and time. Through his relationship building, he has been able to establish trust in our community. Dealing with kids is a specialized area, and the Apple Valley Police Department is essential. Protecting our future is a must in handling matters for kids who are the next generation. Continuing to provide safety and security to students and staff at our district and schools is important. As a parent and former worker with the school district, I know what it was like to be on campuses, in classes, and working with kids. Carl has been a pleasure working with over these years and is an asset to the police department. Today more than ever, we need to feel secure when we are working on campus or just visiting a campus. That officers responding to a need provide good sound advice, guidance, and calm leadership. Alice Wright. The next comment is from William A. Kirkpatrick. I am making a public comment in regards to Carl Willis being transferred from AVUSD Police Department to the Transportation Department. I have known Officer Willis for over 11 years. My kids have attended AVUSD schools. I have observed Officer Willis as a very professional police officer who exhibits the type of community policing skills that all police officers should exhibit. Officer Carl Willis is always helpful and giving of his time to listen to AVUSD parents and their concerns. He always has a smile on his face, and many of the parents know him and greet him. Officer Willis has acquired an abundance of tech knowledge and explicit knowledge while working as a police officer for AVUSD for almost 2 decades. There are many examples of his knowledge that I have seen Officer Willis display while applying his skills and all his experience that he has acquired over the course of his career. For example, ensuring the order and safety on school grounds and traffic control. In addition, he exceeds the community's expectations by engaging with students, teachers, staff, and the community to foster strong school-police partnerships. I am hopeful that the AVUSD board gives consideration to the information I am sharing pertaining to Officer Carl Willis. As I have mentioned, he has developed a number of professional and personal traits, which make him an outstanding asset. His experience needs to be utilized in the AVUSD Police Department to protect, serve, mentor, train, and improve AVUSD Police Department policies and continue to serve the community. Thank you, William Kirkpatrick. The next 2 comments are from Mario Manu. They're very similar, but there's a change in verbiage, so I want to make sure that I read both because it seems as they were both submitted. My name is Mario Manu. I have lived and grown up in the town of Apple Valley for 30 years. I attended Desert Knolls Elementary, Vista Campagna Middle School, and Granite Hills High School through the early 90s and 2000s. I have known Mr. Willis for over 25 years, not only through his professionalism as an exemplary campus police officer, but also through his service to the community as a youth sports coach. His presence in uniform not only helped comfort me when I was attending AVUSD schools, but relaxed me and reassured me of my safety and security while on or at an AVUSD event. I cannot express how much of a staple to the community this man is. A man of principle, great character, strong morals, and work ethic. Mr. Willis is a great inspiration to all those lucky enough to meet and have had conversation with him. His service to our community, I believe, is greatly undervalued and not completely understood. As a campus police officer, he not only kept the peace in schools, but served as a teacher, being a great example of civility and professionalism to our community's youth. I truly believe that you would be doing the town of Apple Valley and the High Desert community a disservice if you reassign Mr. Willis somewhere other than his previous post in the AVUSD police force. I know that myself and many more who were brought up through AVUSD would feel much more safer and relieved sending our children to AVUSD, knowing Mr. Willis is helping watch our kids and keeping them safe. This is also from Mario Manu. My name is Mario Manu. I have lived and grown up in the town of Apple Valley for over 30 years. I attended Desert Knolls Elementary, Vista Campagna Middle School, and Granite Hills High School through the 90s and 2000s. I have known Mr. Willis for over 25 years, not only through his profession as an exemplary transportation safety officer, but also through his service to the community as a youth sports coach. His presence in uniform not only helped comfort me when I was attending AVUSD schools, but relaxed me and reassured me of the safety and security while I was attending an AVUSD event. I cannot express how much of a staple to the community this man is. A man of principle, great character, strong morals, and work ethic. Mr. Willis is a great inspiration to those lucky enough to have met and have had conversation with him. His service to our community, I believe, is greatly undervalued and not completely understood. As a transportation safety officer, he not only kept the peace in and around schools, but served as a teacher, being a great example of civility and professionalism to our community's youth. I truly believe that you would be doing the town of Apple Valley, the High Desert community, a disservice if you reassign Mr. Willis somewhere other than his previous post as a transportation safety officer. I know that myself and many more who were brought up through AVUSD would feel much more safer and relieved sending our children to the AVUSD schools, knowing Mr. Willis is helping watch our kids and keep them safe.
That's it?
Donna,
Yes.
that's it.
Um,
We're going to close session.
yes,
Can
we
you
need to
pull
read
the
everything in.
speaker close to you? We can't hear
Okay.
you.
We need to go into closed session.
Can't hear you, Donna.
Oh, we need to,
You need to pull that down.
Yeah, put it down.
okay. We need to go into closed session. Can you hear me now? Okay.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Calling the meeting to order.
And then if we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have student reports.
It'll be the one called board streaming. There you go. Got it.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Nelson, and attendees. I hope you all
No shoes.
had an excellent and safe summer. My name is Erin Forget, and I am the Governing Council President for the 2020-2021 school year. I'm very excited to update all of you on what Granite
This is Erin.
It is Erin. Yes. You want to try it again, Kylie? Oh.
She's not playing it yet, so.
board members, Superintendent Nelson, and attendees. I hope you all had an excellent and safe summer. My name is Erin Forget, and I am the Governing Council President for the 2020-2021 school year. I'm very excited to update all of you on what Granite does this year, whether that be in person or from afar. Granite has already introduced many online activities to keep up school spirits from afar, while also providing students with any resources they may need to be successful in distance learning. As these uncertain times continue, we hope to provide a consistent environment for students to look forward to. The first 3 days of school consisted of getting to know our staff, learning how online classes were going to work, and completing short activities which entered us into drawings to win t-shirts. After this, we began normal classes and have been doing so since. Due to the hard work of everyone at Granite, our first few weeks of school have been very successful. While our student body adjusted to online learning, ASB decided to host a virtual Spirit Week so students could show off their Cougar pride from home. This Spirit Week was an immense success and we had a lot of participation. This outcome has led us to plan many more for the coming weeks, which you will hear more about as we release them to our student body. Not only do we want our students to show their school spirit, but we want our staff to as well. So today we hosted a Spirit Day exclusively for our staff. This too was met with a lot of participation and is being considered another success. While everyone has been working hard to keep up school spirit, there is certainly a hole left where our phenomenal sports teams would normally be at. Due to this, our athletics department has been sure to put out multiple messages encouraging our student athletes to keep their spirits up because we look forward to having all of our usual sporting events in the spring. These messages have provided our students with something to look forward to and keep working towards. Overall, everyone at Granite has been working very cohesively to ensure that our students continue to be successful and spirited as they have in years past, and we will continue to do so for as long as it takes. Thank you all for your time this evening, and always remember, maroon and gray lead the way.
That's a new one.
That was a nice adjustment.
That's good.
She's still typing.
Greetings, esteemed board members. My name is Maisel Sia, and I am Apple Valley High School's ASB line president for the 2020-2021 school year. I would like to start off by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to share how our school is working together to create a sense of normalcy for our students. Though it is off to an unusual start, our staff and students have been hard at work to get ready for the school year. Our staff has been busy organizing a distance learning system that will keep students engaged and motivated. Since this type of schooling is new to all of us, I am proud to see how well our Sun Devil staff is handling this unexpected situation. We started off our school year with informational Zoom meetings held by our principal, Ms. Howell, vice principals, and counselors. We then had meetings to get to know our teachers and meet our fellow classmates. Last week, we had a textbook pickup where different grade levels went on their assigned date to pick up textbooks and school supplies. The camp and mass academies provided their students with bags filled with supplies. The mass students received stethoscopes and blood pressure cuffs to assist their learning experience. Last week, we also had our first virtual Spirit Week. We received many pictures of students dressing up and posted them on our various social media accounts. Our ASB class officers have also been working on virtual fundraisers. Clubs that are working on getting rechartered have meanwhile been preparing for the year. The cheer and pom team have been holding virtual practices and are working on a dance compilation video. The cheerleaders are filming their dances and they will compile them into a collective video. The camp program has been planning for video announcements and the host program just created their officer team. Sensations and vocal motion choirs are practicing and preparing for a virtual back-to-school recital. National Honor Society and Mock Trial are now accepting applications. Other school clubs are planning on how they can adapt to a virtual setting. Our athletes are still practicing individually to stay in shape for a hopeful return of sports for the spring semester. As you can see, the beginning of our year has been filled with planning and adapting to these unprecedented times, but I believe that our school is adjusting to completely converting to a virtual setting very well. I'm excited to see how the rest of our year will turn out. I take much pride in my school, and I thank you for letting me share it with you. Thank you. And remember, Sun Devil pride is contagious.
And then Kylie, you have
Yeah, I don't think it's the mic. I think it's over there. There we go. Thank you, Jason.
I have a report from CSEA. Good afternoon, board members, superintendent, and assistant superintendents. I hope you and your families are in good health. I apologize for not having a report last month. The start of the new school year puts a lot of demands on us all. Being the first time with these kinds of conditions for almost all of us, I thought it was best to not yet make preconceived notions. I would be telling you a story if I told you this was a perfect start for the school year. Many of our classified employees have worked hard to make this hopefully new, temporary type of learning successful. We do have an MOU the school board approved in the last month with very little demands on the district. One of one of our intentions was expecting to have some latitude to address the needs of the classified staff more on an individual basis, thus keeping costs down. This MOU was last minute with no fault to the district. I realized we had less than 5 days to come up with an agreement. If we had drug out negotiations to address more particular concerns, it would have been a lot more hectic at the startup. The main positive goal of the MOU was to save jobs, and collaboratively, it looks like this has been successful. The introduction of student care personally helped, and I consider it a milestone for our district. I think it could use fine-tuning as we progress, but it is a great thing for staff. Many of our classified employees have benefited from this great idea, and I thank you. Many of the single guardians of children would hate for this to disappear. I want you to know that CSEA is committed to working cooperatively, and all we ask is to be treated equally and fair. I soon hope to see you all again in real life. Thank you for this opportunity to share our viewpoints. CSEA Chapter 828, Mike Kaufman, President.
No report from ABUTA.
I did not receive a report from AVUDA.
C5, closed session reports. The clerk of the board will report out on any action taken in closed.
In closed session, the Board of Trustees, can you hear me?
Yes.
In closed session, the Board of Trustees took action in support of the following recommendation from the superintendent. B2, public employee, appointment, resignation, retirement, reduction. On a motion by Maria Okpara, seconded by Wilson So, vote of 5-0. The Board of Trustees approved the following. Appoint Marcus Bruce as Assistant Principal, Granite Hills High School, Range 8, Column 1, on the certificated management salary schedule 210 base duty days, effective to be determined.
We're going to have you re-read that. Are we going to do her mic as well?
Oh, I think so. Is it turned off?
I can hear, but it's very faint. Just repeat it.
You want to test? Hi.
Give her teacher voice.
Closer. No.
Now you're mic.
Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
There it is. There is a delay, so thank you for that.
Now you'll
So-
read it again, sorry.
In closed session, the Board of Trustees took action in support of the following recommendation from the superintendent. B2, public employee appointment, resignation, retirement, reduction. On a motion by Maria Okpara, seconded by Wilson So, vote of 5-0. The Board of Trustees approved the following. Appoint Marcus Bruce as Assistant Principal, Granite Hills High School, Range 8, Column 1, on the certificated management salary schedule, 210 base duty days, effective to be determined. Employment is contingent upon successfully meeting the pre-employment requirement. B2, public employee appointment, resignation, retirement, reduction. On a motion by Maria Okpara, seconded by Donna Davis, vote of 5-0. The Board of Trustees approved the following. Appoint Jeanette Martinez as Assistant Principal, Vanguard Preparatory, Range 7, Column 1, on the certificated management salary schedule, 205 base duty days, effective to be determined. Employment is contingent upon successfully meeting the pre-employment requirement. B3, Conference on Litigation, Elizabeth Cardenas et al. Versus AVUSD Government Code Section 54954.5D, amended government tort claim, or in the alternative application for permission to present a late claim. In closed session, on motion of Mr. So, seconded by Mr. Bender, the board voted unanimously to deny the amended government tort claim. and to deny the alternative application for permission to present a late claim by Elizabeth Cardenas et al. B7, conference with labor negotiator, agency negotiator, Trinae Nelson, employee organization or unrepresented. On a motion by Mr. Raleigh, seconded by Mr. So, the Board of Trustees approved the following. Effective July 1, 2019, 2% shall be added to the exempt classified management salary schedule, the non-exempt classified supervisory and confidential salary schedule, and the certificated management salary schedule, not to include assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, nor superintendent. That's it.
C6, adoption of the agenda. The board may approve the agenda as is or add and/or pull items from the consent agenda for discussion and/or action. We need to adopt the agenda as is. Do I have a motion?
I'll
Second.
that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 5 votes.
Okay, and then we have nothing under D. Under E, we have 5 presentations. The first one is the presentation of the school intercom systems, which was based on a comment, public comment at our last board meeting about a safety issue.
Thank you. And I'll just make reference to some printed materials that I provided to each board member and that will be part of the items that are provided in the minutes. And I've got Mr. Schulenberg's copy here. I'm going to hand back to him because I'm going to read through them, but I'm going to summarize them. But I wanted you to have a claim by claim answer to what was presented in a public comment at our last board meeting. If you'll remember, we had a public comment regarding the intercom systems.
Correct.
And so essentially, if I can summarize just several of the items there, you'll notice that one, that the initial claim that the intercom systems are being removed is not true. We did have some intercom systems that experienced some trouble. You'll remember board comments about a year ago where some folks came from school sites and said they were having trouble. They either couldn't hear, didn't have a system, and that was true. We had a system that failed. We brought in our local vendor, asked them for support. They were unable to make the necessary repairs and recommended that we replace the entire system. At the same time, however, we had in-house through our one of our employees, actually, a low voltage specialist in the IT department, was testing for another purpose, something that turned out to be a solution. So we installed essentially a new controller at that school site and have since used that at several others. What this has done is not only made that intercom system functional, but it's actually upgraded the feature set. So it's been a wonderful solution for us. It was a low cost in-house solution, but it allowed us to do things that as a principal I could never do. Dustin and Matt and I have always joked about how when we were principals, we changed the bell schedule by operating it through a phone interface and dialed the sequences of numbers and key turns in order to tell the bell schedule to ring at a certain time. Now, an assistant principal can go to a computer interface and program a new schedule, put that schedule to ring, and sure enough, it's so much simpler. So it is functioning much better. So that's the upgrade actually that we've accomplished. Some of the other claims included things like that the feature set is not in keeping with what is recommended. And I'll just tell you this, that our entire sort of system includes the intercoms, our phone system, and a set of mobile apps that work as well. And so this system of all those parts works in concert to affect our safety plan. We do have the ability to call out of the room, of course. We have different ways of doing that. We don't have a call button like you used to have in a long time ago. So instead, what we have is we have the phones or a mobile app, but that allows for a high level of functionality, as is recommended through the app.
Let's say a teacher has a problem. Nothing's equipped to hit that button.
No, and what the phone does is allows them to do several things. One, it tells them where's the call coming from, exactly where and what the situation is. They can do it from a phone, right? And it also allows them to instigate, for example, a series of more, instead of just an alert, it can say lock down the whole campus from the phone. It can institute a active shooter alert from any phone on campus. These are approved by our risk management department, our insurer, and it's also part of our plan that's in partnership with other local agencies, including the Sheriff's Department, is our tactical plan, which is not publicly available, but it is approved using these systems. The NEMA SB 40 standard that's referenced in the complaint or in the public comment is indeed an industry trade group representative document that does suggest feature sets. They are not building code and they are not required. They are simply recommendations. And most of those recommendations are in our system. But that particular feature set at the moment is not in ours, but it is also not part of our safety plan. We go through a process of determining what are the needs and how can we meet those needs. Our current system is effective, operational, and meets the needs. So that's the essence of what you'll see here, but this is a claim by claim answer from last time. Thank you. Any questions about that specifically?
I'm glad you talked to us about it because I thought we were taking the intercom systems
Right.
out
Right.
because we had phones.
No.
We have both.
And I love this part.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Then any other questions on that presentation? Okay, then Mr. Schulenberg is going to take over the screen and do a presentation on the budget committee structure and function.
Thank you. 1 second here as I get this going.
Did anyone hear how big the deficit is going to be for Los Angeles? Announced this morning, $441 million, the city budget
In debt.
deficit. But we're not going to be that bad, California,
We're still in
because so
session,
much
aren't we?
money has been made into the stock
We're still in
market.
session, aren't we?
And it-
What did you say?
and
So I don't know why we're having this conversation. We're still in session, right?
All right. Well, thank you. And I would like to move on with a little presentation on Budget Advisory Committee based on a question from board a couple meetings ago. In our board policy, in your board policy, 3100 budget, Budget Advisory Committee is something that states the superintendent or designee may appoint a budget advisory committee. If the decision is to structure and appoint a budget advisory committee, the membership shall include representatives of the board, as long as it is not a majority of the board, representatives from staff, and also community members. It dictates that the duties assigned are going to be based on the district needs at the time, so that committee will be convened with specific duties, and that any recommendations from that committee shall be advisory only and non-binding on the Board of Trustees. The Administrative Regulation 3100 goes on to describe the membership in a little more detail. Again, governing board members less than a majority, district and school site administration, bargaining unit representatives, additional certificated and/or classified staff, parents, guardians, local business leaders, community members, and students will make up any budget advisory committee. Samples of duties that may be assigned to the committee. This is not an exhaustive list, nor is it an exclusive list. However, duties can include recommendations regarding budget priorities, recommendations for cost reduction strategies, including reductions to programs, efficiencies to operations, or cessations of certain programs. Reviewing clarity and the effectiveness of budget documents, any public communication or board communication, and of course, the responsibility to present reports to the superintendent and board, either a progress report or a final report based on the specific duties that were assigned to the committee. Requirement in Administrative Regulation 31 is that the committee understands their duties and they're defined and communicated in writing to all committee members. One of the biggest requirements is to provide all necessary background information to complete the duties. And that's one of the biggest educational pieces of any budget committee, is to make sure the members of that committee understand the revenue stream of the district, the expenses and the structure of those expenses, and how we deal with that on an annual basis throughout our budget cycle. Identifying the tasks and the timelines for completion of each task, and also identifying a timeline for reporting the committee's progress. So next steps would be, of course, for us to define any specific duties based on current district needs that budget committee would take. Invite and establish committee membership and establish timelines to provide that necessary background information, completion of those tasks, and when in fact a report would be given to the superintendent and to the board. That's the structure and the function of the Budget Advisory Committee per Board Policy 3100 and Administrative Regulation 3100. And that concludes my presentation on the Budget Committee.
So having said that, when do we set up one?
I would refer to the superintendent to establish that based on board direction. As the board policy says, the superintendent may establish a budget committee.
And so you had requested information regarding a budget committee, and that's what Mr. Schillenberg is bringing you back, and we are more than open to starting a budget committee based on the policy we already have in place.
Okay,
Okay?
okay. So the question again is, how soon can you set that up?
We can fairly soon. We just need to know which of the board members is going to be the ones participating, because we can only have 2. We can't have 3 or more. So as soon as we have whoever the board members are, we will start establishing who is, sorry, I don't know who's.
My question would be, is there really a need for a budget committee? It's the Assistant Superintendent of Business has been presenting this information as we get it.
I think it prevents controversy.
I think there is a need.
Oh, sorry.
Transparency.
Is that his phone saying?
It does, and I think when you look at the,
I think
When
we
you
have
look-
a need.
sorry, I'm sorry. I think when you look at the very specific why have a budget committee, part of that is educating people about the budget,
Correct.
inside and out. So I can send an email out to board members under a blind CC, so it's not a serial meeting. You can let me know who you recommend to participate, or you can agree right now who that is, you can recommend, and then we can start moving forward with putting one together.
Well, can I nominate
we
somebody
ask
to
for-
go?
Ask for
Rick?
volunteers. How about you? Mona?
I will.
Okay,
Okay.
we have 2.
So we only
Are we
need
good?
2. So we got 2.
Okay, we got 2.
You got 2.
Okay, so now I
Okay.
know who to communicate from the board.
Okay.
You volunteer.
And then we will get back with you about a timeline for that. Okay?
Okay. So when you get to go to do that, when you're looking for certificated, are you working through the different 2 associations?
We would have to,
do that.
absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
How you gonna get the teacher?
The
Through the-
association?
Through the associations. We can include others as well. We can include others as well, but always have somebody from both associations
Also,
and
the
parents.
Former head of the association wants to be on there.
If they would like to, they're welcome to participate.
Well, if we have,
It
we,
actually says that.
Yeah.
I think we need to allow the association to make that determination. And after that, we fill whatever other extra spots needs to be in place.
We'll bring back a report on when it's ready to be established and who is
Okay.
comprising of that committee, okay? Give us a few board meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Matt, it's you again.
Yes, it is. I took over the screen with another presentation. You should have a copy of this. It's the presentation, the overview of a proposed certificates of participation. It looks like
COP.
this. It's a fairly brief presentation. If you recall, earlier, several meetings ago, the board approved a contract with Public Economics Incorporated to take a look at our redevelopment revenue stream. That is a property tax increment stream that we receive based on redevelopment agencies and the successor agencies that we have been utilizing for small capital facilities improvement projects. Currently, the project at Sycamore Rocks and the bakery at Granite Hills are being funded through that, but we have some other projects. And the purpose of hiring Public Economics was to analyze that stream to determine amount that we may be able to borrow against that revenue stream to speed up the completion of some of our improvement projects throughout the district.
What rate?
We don't know.
Is it there a fixed rate? You have any idea?
Yes, I will get to that. That's gonna be determined later. In this particular situation, this presentation was put together by Mr. Tim Carty of Piper Sandler. Mr. Carty has been the district's financial advisor for many years and has worked with us on different financing and refundings previously. So he helped me put this together. So just a general overview of what a COPS is. It's a certificate of participation, which is basically a type of loan taken out by the school district, and it's publicly offered. So it's selling a debt instrument out on the public market. It does not require voter approval. So there's a whole process we have to go through, adopting a resolution, notifying the county auditor controller, notifying the county superintendent of schools of our intent to issue non-voter approved debt. Now, what that means is the debt service for this does not fall on the taxpayers of Apple Valley Unified like a voter approved general obligation bond. The debt service is the sole responsibility of the school district. And it's our intent to utilize that RDA revenue stream, the restricted revenue stream, to pay the debt service. However, as that third bullet point on the slide says, a COP is repaid by all legally available funds. If the redevelopment revenue stream for some reason does not materialize as projected by public economics, then the general fund would be responsible. However, a slide later on, I'll talk about specific what we're looking at for the RDA and how we're borrowing against that. The certificates of participation will carry a fixed interest rate with a typical repayment term of 30 years. Our interest rate that we're looking at is right around 3% right now. They are fairly low borrowing money. So this is the time to do it if we are going to borrow money in this instrument. So the structure, there's a lot of arrows going back and forth, but our 5 board members are also board members of the Apple Valley Public Facilities Corporation. And that is a nonprofit organization that we will essentially lease a school site to. In this example up here, we have identified Granite Hills as a possible school site that we could use, whose appraised value or value of that campus covers the amount of debt we're looking to issue. So we lease it to the Public Facilities Corporation. They lease it back to us. And we pay the lease payments through the corporation to the investors who buy the investment document out on the open market. And they basically front the money to the district, which will be held at a trust through a bank. And as we complete our projects or have payment applications, we apply for those payment applications to be paid from those funds held by the trustee. We've identified some projects. Currently, we are working on finishing up the CTE Bakery and the ADA upgrades at Granite Hills. Also, if you've driven by Sycamore Rocks, you've seen some progress on the parking lot and the ADA upgrades to that and the parent drop-off at Sycamore Rocks, the phase 1. We are proposing to include phase 2, which is some additional ADA and playground upgrades on the campus at Sycamore Rocks. We have our district-wide security camera project, which is already in process. Mariana Academy ADA parking and playground upgrades. And what that will do is will align our campus to some improvements the town of Apple Valley have recently completed on Manhasset in front of the school. Some street parking is no longer available, and we have to upgrade our parking area and our bus circle to kind of match what the town has done and better serve the community of Mariana.
Did you take away some of the park?
The town?
Yeah.
In their project did not take away any of the park, no. And
Okay.
we will not be taking any of the park adjacent, because that is not our property at Mariana.
Okay.
That property belongs to the town of Apple Valley. At Sycamore Rocks, we did take some of the park because that is our property.
Okay.
And we've been in communication with the town. In fact, I met Mr. David Coleman. He's the Park and Recs director up there yesterday to discuss the future of Sycamore Rocks Park, and we were entering a partnership and doing some things up there to serve that particular community.
Thank you.
We are proposing to do some ADA parking upgrades here at this facility to better serve the public when we're able to open to the public post-pandemic. We are proposing to include some ADA parking and drop-off upgrades adjacent to Sandia. If the board recalls, many years ago, we purchased the property directly east of Sandia from San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. The town is also interested in a joint project there to create a small community park in that area. Mr. Coleman and I did talk about that concept, nothing official at this point. And then a little contingency for increased cost. But I would like to point out that green box on the bottom. We currently have a solar COPS that we took out in 2012 to pay for the solar generation facilities at 3 of our campuses. That currently is an impact to our general fund, our unrestricted general fund, and using the proceeds from this certificate of participation to pay that off would relieve that debt service from the unrestricted general fund and make that funding available to serve the students of Apple Valley Unified School District. This slide, and I apologize, it's very small, it's tough to see, but this goes out to the year 2053, the next 33 years of projected RDA revenue. And the redevelopment revenues are projected in that blue column. And you'll see for this year, we're projecting about a little under 1.3 million in redevelopment revenues that will flow to Apple Valley Unified, specifically restricted for facilities use. We are proposing to only use approximately 60% or approximately $750,000 towards debt service. So we're not taking it to the limit. We're trying to be very conservative. And the estimates in the blue column that Public Economics prepared for us are actually very conservative and lowered due to the current COVID pandemic in terms of property tax increases annually.
I'd like to ask a quick question.
Yes.
When you say RDA, is that the RDA from the George Air Force Base closure?
We are in several RDAs.
Okay.
Yes. That is one of them, along with the Apple Valley RDA. And as you know, all the RDAs were dissolved. So now we're dealing with the successor agencies and the successor agreements from those RDAs. But that's why we paid Public Economics to do this for us, because that's all they do is analyze and project redevelopment pass-throughs for school districts. There are several parties involved in this transaction. First off, Piper Sandler, Mr. Carty as our financial advisor. Stradling Attorneys at Law has been our counsel on past certificates of participation and bond refinancing. We had to loop in the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools and the San Bernardino County. Last week, we did send them a letter notifying them that we were proposing this. And we had to do that because of a 30-day deadline when we're going to be bringing some further information for your consideration and action at the October 1st meeting. That gives the County Superintendent of Schools and the County Auditor Controller a chance to comment. They do not have to approve this, but they have the chance to make comments based on our proposed debt financing when it's non-voter approved debt. U.S. Bank, we're proposing to use them as our trustee. They're our current trustee with our other COPS and have done a good job processing that for us and taking care of those payments. And Standard & Poor's, of course, will be a credit rating agency for us that if the board chooses to go through with this, as we bring those resolutions for your consideration at the October 1st meeting, we'll have to get a credit rating agency from Standard & Poor's. And then the underwriter is actually the organization who buys the instruments and sells those instruments on the public market. We have yet to identify an underwriter for this particular project. So as I mentioned, some of the next steps, we are working with Stradling to draft the legal documents and the preliminary official statement, which kind of summarizes the entire transaction. Those legal documents and that preliminary official statement will be in front of you as a board at the October 1st meeting for your consideration. And then if you choose to approve moving forward with this debt issuance, we will have a credit rating meeting. My staff, Mr. Carty, will take care of that. That's nothing any of you are involved in. And then we'll work with Standard & Poor's. We'll select an underwriter. We'll sell the certificates of participation, and we're looking at projecting we'll have the proceeds sometime in the middle of November. Does anybody have any questions?
I just want to share that I have worked with the law firm of Sterling and Yoder on this several major assessment districts down in Riverside. And then, of course, Tim Carty, I know him for 35, 40 years.
And again, you will see some resolutions at the October 1st meeting for your consideration.
And then Matt, your next presentation.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and start this one, but before I move to the unaudited actuals report, I would like to just discuss, I do not have any slides, but at the last meeting when I was not present, I know Mr. Wilson posed a question about our custodial and maintenance response to our classrooms and cleaning. One of the things I would like to point out and make sure the board and the public understand, when we're dealing with our classrooms and school sites right now, we're dealing with basically a two-step process as we go in. We have cleaning, number one. which has not changed from our previous process. That's the soap and water, the vacuuming, the cleaning all the surfaces, getting the dirt and grime and detritus out of the carpet, make sure classrooms are clean. The second step, which we've done, which we're enhancing now, is the disinfecting step. We have products through Waxy. They're called a 700 and a 710, which are both hospital grade disinfectants with a very broad, and I'm going to use a term, kill claims, because they are considered pesticides as they kill bacteria and viruses. SARS-CoV-2 and SARS coronaviruses are listed as viruses that the Waxy 700 and 710 kill with a certain dwell time, and it differs per product. But those are the products that we have in place. Yes, it does take time to spray and apply those products. They have dwell time on those surfaces, and then we have to wipe them off. We also have a sanitizing product. It's a Waxy 910. It's a sanitizing solution, which is a no wipe. That's a sanitizing solution. It doesn't have as broad a kill claim as the disinfectants, but it's similar to the hand sanitizer on the table in front of you. And that's something we can spray on a surface, and there's dwell time, and you leave it. You do not have to wipe it up. So that's another product that our custodians have. Mr. So did mention hydrogen peroxide, and Waxy has a Waxy 730 hydrogen peroxide product, but it does not have as broad a kill claim or as a broad spectrum kill as those disinfectants. And it does not list a SARS coronavirus as one of the viruses that the hydrogen peroxide kills. So we're currently not using that in lieu of the disinfectant products we have, but that is a product out there that we could utilize as an application similar to the sanitizer, where you apply it and you leave it. No, sir, we do not utilize Agent Orange.
So you do provide training for the people who would do the cleaning, right?
Absolutely.
So that's important.
Yes, our custodial supervisor provides training and updates to all of our custodial staff regarding proper mixing and application of all the chemicals that our custodians use on a regular basis. One other item Mr. So mentioned, he mentioned looking at new and innovative things to clean in classrooms. And we are looking at a few things. The product and the process we've really focused on now is what would be called an electrostatic sprayer. It takes a liquid and a tablet and then creates a solution, which is electronically charged and sprayed in a room so it sticks to surfaces, both hard, non-porous surfaces and porous surfaces such as cloth, carpets, all the surfaces. And it is something that our custodians can go through with a backpack type sprayer in all of our classrooms, spray it, and then leave. No wiping necessary. It's a effective, cost-effective, time-effective way to disinfect classrooms. We are also looking at some larger disinfecting machines that would be able to do cafeterias, gymnasiums on a regular basis. We do have some of those on hand that we have utilized already, and we have more on order to deploy throughout the district. We have looked into UV light germ killers. Those are less efficient than the electrostatic sprayers. And also, when those UV lights are on, you don't want to be in the room. It's not a light that you want to have in contact with.
It's
with
MRI.
You. Yes. And we were looking at Hepa filtration for our HVAC systems, along with higher MERV rating on our filters. But we have to be very cautious there, because if we increase the MERV rating of our air filtration too high, it overstresses the equipment and it can actually damage the equipment. So we have to find a good balance with our HVAC equipment. So if anybody has any questions, I apologize, no slides. I just wanted to verbalize in response to Mr. Wilson's questions.
The question I have is, if you use any one of those in the classroom, let's say a teacher goes in to do their presentation, how long does it, do you have to have it before a human being can walk into the space?
Well, with our current cleaning processes, when we apply a Waxy 710 and a 730, I believe their dwell time is 10 minutes, and then the custodians do wipe it up. And once it's wiped up and cleaned up after the disinfection process, you can go in right away.
Okay.
With the electrostatic sprayer, and you spray it, again, there's a slight dwell time, but then it's safe to enter that room after a matter of minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So one final presentation. I'm sorry, I'll talk a lot and I apologize. This particular presentation has a few slides and there's some detail in it. So I want to go through some parts so I can get to some of that detail. This is the update on our 2019-20 unaudited actuals. Now, just a quick visit to the 2019-20 budget cycle. If you can recall all the way back to January of 2019, we were in a great place economically in California, in this country. It's Governor Newsom's first budget, 10th year of economic recovery. We get to the May revise in 2019. We were still strong tax revenues at the state level. Statutory COLA last year was 3.26%. We move into the on-time budget in June of 2019. Again, this is a year ago, over a year ago. They ended up funding Prop 98 at the minimum guarantee with no manipulations, which is what the legislature has done a lot of the previous years. Governor Newsom did dedicate some non-Prop 98 funding to assist local educational agencies with the increased retirement, PERS and STIRS contributions. But an impending recession, of course, will have any impact on the state and, of course, local districts. So here we are in August and September of 2020, 19 months after we started the budget process, closing the books in what I would call a completely different world. As we go through that budget year, just to remind the board, we do have several reporting intervals. We have our first interim, second interim, estimated actuals in May of 2020, which established the baseline for our current year budget. Now, when we close the books, that's kind of like the reset button, or it's the end all. So now we are not estimating what happened last year. We actually have the actual financial activity from 1920, which of course affects our starting point for the current year. So we go back and make those adjustments to our beginning fund balance. So in a look back at last year, we brought in just under $163 million in revenue to Apple Valley Unified School District, the lion's share from our local control funding formula. And you'll see 5% federal revenue, some other state, and 2% local revenue. Of that, we spent 165.1, including expenditures and transfers out. So you'll see employee certificated salaries, classified salaries, and employee benefits makes up the vast majority of our expenses. We are a people organization. And that's the 39% on certificated, 16% on classified, and 28% across the employee benefits for both groups, or all groups, including management. Books and supplies, services, capital outlay, other outgoing, a transfer out. Here's the detail. So you'll see on the unrestricted and restricted side, unrestricted, that first column there, you'll see we overspent our unrestricted revenue by just under $2 million, 1.9. We overspent our restricted revenue by about $340,000. And you look in the combined column, we did end up overspending our combined budget by about $2.2 million. Now that's less than what we had estimated when we were in the end of April and beginning of May, but we had estimates. And we were in such an interesting time with the COVID pandemic. There were some questions that were unanswered when we were at the estimated actuals that are now answered when we close the books. When we look at the ending fund balance on the unrestricted side, we have to reserve $40,000 for revolving cash. Based on our stores inventory, we have to set that aside. And of course, we have a 3% required reserve, and we do meet that on the unrestricted side for last year while we close the books. On the restricted side, we had an ending fund balance of about 1.8. The vast majority sits in our routine restricted maintenance account, 1.4 million. For some of our larger projects, that budget is managed by our Director of Maintenance and Operations in conjunction with myself in determining and prioritizing projects as we move through the year. And this is a chart I've had in my actual presentation the last couple of years. It kind of looks at the evolution of our ending fund balance. If I could bring your attention to that first column there, when we closed the books in June of 2012, we had a $36 million combined ending fund balance. And you see we spent that down significantly, back down to 22.3, down to 19.8, then back up to 30.2. And that jump was really due to some uncertainty when the LCAP came into play with our local control funding formula. we had budgeted a whole lot of new positions in the district, and we're unable to fill some of those, unable to work through some of the things we had planned to do. So we did have some money fall to the bottom line that year. 17, fairly balanced. And bring you to this slide, you'll see in 2017, we ended that year with $30.9 million, just about $31 million. Now that's combined, both unrestricted and restricted. And you see we've been on a steady downward trend since 2017. You'll notice 18 was 26, 2019 was 22 million, 2020 we are now at $20 million ending fund balance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we did have some uncertainty between estimated and closing the books. So you'll see at estimated actuals, we had estimated our ending fund balance at about 12.6 million. Well, it came in at 20.1, and that's a $7.5 million variance. Now, that's not our intent to have a variance that size, but I do have some detail to explain some of that. Because the last 3 years, you'll see from estimated actuals to unaudited actuals, we had a very small variance in each year. And that is our goal in the finance office, to estimate as best we can. So some of that detail. When we look at our revenue side, we had a $46,000 unrestricted adjustment to the LCFF between May and closing the books. That's on $135 million. So a $46,000 adjustment on that is pretty small. When we look at the federal revenue, we had a net $2 million reduction in our federal revenue. That's because of the mechanism of how the federal revenue flows to us. As I've mentioned before, the majority of our federal revenue flows to us as what's called unearned revenue. We don't earn the revenue unless we spend it. So when we close the books, we have to reconcile our revenue with our actual expenditures in each one of those federal restricted programs. For instance, I'll pick Title I. Our allocation from the California Department of Education for Title I, I'm going to round it to about $5 million. That means we have the authority to spend up to $5 million in this particular fiscal year. And as we allocate those funds, both to school site operations and specific activities at school sites, and also district operations, we only spent about 4.5 million of those dollars. Keeping in mind, we did not have students in any of our schools on our campuses most of March, April, and May. So that's about 10% of our allocation. Now, that doesn't mean we lose that money. It doesn't mean we send it back. That $500,000 of revenue that we reduced in the 1920 school year, we're able to book that revenue in the 2021 school year as carryover revenue. And of course, we will also book carryover expenses when we post that revenue. Same with all those programs listed there under restricted in the federal side. In the other state, we had a positive adjustment in revenue, about 1.9 million. We've got a little more lottery. Now that's unrestricted money that flows to us, that flows out to the school sites for principals' discretionary spending at school sites, for supplies, materials for our kids. Most of it on the restricted. The lion's share, we had an increase from estimated to closing the books of 2.4 million in what's called the STRS on behalf. The state requires us to put on our books what they pay to STRS on behalf of our certificated employees. It's not actual revenue we ever receive, but we have to book the revenue on our books and a corresponding expenditure. And we never know what that amount is until we close our books. It's an accounting entry, but it does affect our revenue and expenses to a net zero. But this does affect that other state revenue because on that summary slide, all these numbers are aggregated together. And you'll see we had some restricted programs. Again, these are grant programs that we do not earn the money unless we spend it. So as we close the books, we have to reduce the revenue accordingly to match our expenditures. Now again, this revenue is available in the next fiscal year, much like that federal restricted revenue. So we had some other local revenue adjustments. Mainly, we had increased revenue on the AB 602, that's to support special education, and we had some increased revenue from estimated to actuals in our RDA pass-through. So overall, from estimated actuals to closing the books on the revenue side of the budget, we increased our aggregate revenue by close to $700,000 on a $150 million plus budget. The expenditure side, we had a net adjustment between estimated actuals to unaudited actuals in certificated salaries of an increase of $35,000. So we were pretty close at estimated. Again, that's on all certificated salaries, which includes teachers and certificated managers. A very small adjustment on the unrestricted side of the budget, the $38,000 on the restricted side. We had a net adjustment of $116,000 in increased expenditures and classified salaries, mainly on the unrestricted side. You'll see that there. And then moving to employee benefits, we had a adjustment, $2.8 million increased expenditures, primarily resulting from that STRS on behalf accounting entry for what the state pays to STRS on our behalf. You'll see that was 2.4 million of that 2.8 million. The rest is balancing based on actual payroll and what needs to be paid to STRS and PERS on behalf of our employees by us as we close the books. In books and supplies, this is one of our biggest adjustments, and this is where we strive to have some of the smallest adjustments, but we reduced our expenditures from estimated to actuals by almost 6.2 million, 3.3 of that on the unrestricted side. Those top three line items there, textbook adoption, site lottery budget, and site discretionary fundings were the lion's share. That's 2.9 million of $3.3 million. That 2.9 million, that textbook adoption is a 1.9 million expense that was originally booked in last year, but we didn't get the books by June 30th. So we have to remove that expense, but that's an expense we're going to book in the current year. So that merely delayed the expense from 1920 to 2021. The site lottery budget, that's unrestricted funding that is allocated to principals for their discretionary spending to support student programs at their schools. Again, students were not on campus March, April, May. So that is spending authority that will be passed to the schools as carryover in this fiscal year. Same with site discretionary. That's LCFF funding, unrestricted. That is passed to schools to support student program. That's about $1 million across all 13 school sites. The bottom three, tires, fuel, and oil, general maintenance, and other miscellaneous site adjustments. I think that tires, fuel, and oil was some budgeted expenditures that did not occur because our buses were not out on the road as much. We did not spend money on gas that we had originally budgeted. Same with some of that general maintenance. As we closed in the spring, we did not have all of our maintenance crew working at certain times. So there were some things that were budgeted to happen that did not happen. Again, those projects and maintenance that did not occur last year will be moved into this year. Now, this is still in books and supplies. This is the restricted side of books and supplies now. That 6.2 number is the same net adjustment you saw on the previous slide. The restricted share of that $6.2 million is 2.9. Now you see all those restricted programs that I talked about where we had to reduce the revenue. We also had to reduce the budgeted expenditures based on actual activity. Now again, these programs, that revenue will be booked in the 2021 year along with these expenses as we move it forward. So out of that 6.2 million, about 2.9 was restricted, and that 3.3 on the previous slide, 2.9 of that 3.3 were expenditures that will move into the current year. Services and operating expenditures, we had a net adjustment of a reduction of about 4.6 million. On the unrestricted side, about 2.6 million. A big piece of that was a cabling project that did not complete last year. So that 1.2 million is an expense that did not occur, that will occur this year. The rest of those lines are some budgeted expenditures that did not happen, partly because of the pandemic, partly because some activities slowed down or ceased. For instance, utilities. That utilities line represents water, trash, sewer, and electricity. So we did not spend about $236,000 of what we had budgeted for utilities, because we did not have as many people on our campuses for about 2.5 months. We had some rentals and leases, repairs, legal audit and election costs that we did not spend a budget. Telephone and internet was reorganized last year with our move to voice over internet protocol with our phone system. And we had some other miscellaneous savings across many object codes that were small amounts, but aggregated to about $600,000. So we did have some savings across services and operating expenditures on the unrestricted side of the budget, and also some on the restricted side of the budget. Again, RRMA is our routine restricted maintenance account. Some projects that we were not able to complete in the restricted side will move over to this year. We had reduced special education expenses with students not on campus, and we had some other miscellaneous. In our 6,000s capital outlay, we had a net adjustment of increase of $437,000, mainly due to some projects. We had a sewer issue at Yuckaloma School, which was the lion's share of that. That's some work we had to have done. And then our other outgo, that net adjustment is primarily due to the RDA, the increase in RDA. We also had an increased expense to balance with that increased revenue on the RDA. So a total net expenditure adjustment of $6.8 million. So what that does is, with that 700,000 increased revenue and a 6.8 decrease to expenditures, that's that 7.5 million variance. The majority, which are expenses that will move into the current year. But there was some savings or some costs that we did, some budgeted costs that were not realized due to the pandemic and the closing of our schools. So here's a quick summary slide that kind of takes a look at the unrestricted and the restricted. On the revenue side, you'll see the lion's share of the adjustment falls on the restricted. On the revenue side of the budget, that summarizes that 700,000. And then here, the unrestricted and restricted, but again, a lot of those unrestricted expenses that did not occur this year, mainly in the books and supplies line, will move to the current year, 2021. Moving on to our other funds, and just a quick summary as we move through, we have Fund 11, that's our adult education. You'll see there, she did finish the year with about a $26,000 surplus, so she does have an ending fund balance on the positive side. Fund 12 is our child development, our preschool. She operated with a surplus of about a little under $100,000, and she had a positive audit adjustment last year, so that positively affects her ending fund balance. Nutrition services did run at a deficit last year, and that's a planned deficit. $250,000. We did purchase some equipment, and I believe we'll be faced with another deficit in our food services fund this year as we work through this pandemic and serving meals to our families. Our Fund 14 deferred maintenance ran at a deficit, mainly because it was determined not to make a transfer last year from the unrestricted general fund into deferred maintenance, because we already had overspent on the Fund 01 side to the tune of about $1 million. But we do have a positive ending fund balance in our deferred maintenance. We have Fund 25 capital facilities. That's our developer fees we get from both commercial and residential development in the town. We had a positive increase there. 1.1 million of revenues, over $500,000 of expenditures. So we do have 3.6 million there. That's some money we have in developers fees if we see some growth. That right there will help us place some portable classrooms on campuses for any student growth that may occur in the immediate future. Fund 40, our special reserve for capital outlay. That's the fund that has been supporting our capital facilities improvement projects around the district. Again, that is restricted funding that we transfer in there on an annual basis, that RDA pass-through money. You see, we did spend it down quite a bit, but we do have an ending fund balance. But as of my earlier presentation, I talked about that certificate of participation that will help support this fund in supporting those several $1 million worth of projects, site improvement projects throughout the district. And Fund 51, I put that up there just for your information. That is not a fund that we control. That is a fund that the county auditor, county treasurer controls, and the auditor, controller, tax collector controls, because they collect the tax increment for our general obligation bond, Measure S from 2003. They collect that tax increment and they disperse that tax increment to pay the bond investors when those bonds become due. But it is a fund that's on our books, but we don't control it. So next up, we have our first interim reporting. That's going to be our financials as the end of October. We update our assumptions. We bring everything in line and continue to make those budget adjustments as we move through the year based on our needs. And our auditors will be in district next week. Again, this is the unaudited actuals. They become the audited actuals once the auditor visits and finishes their process. And we typically get our audit report around the middle of December. And I typically present that to you in January for the previous fiscal year. Anybody have any questions? Thank you for your patience. I know that was a lot of
I
information.
do have a question.
Yes.
When you present the first interim report in October, right? That's when we're looking to get it.
The first interim report is our financials as of October 31st, and I will present that to you at our first board meeting of December.
Okay. Will it be possible to then be sure that you include the ending balance and the starting balance so that we will see how we are playing with the numbers?
Absolutely. As part of that first interim reporting, one thing that we are required to do is a multi-year projection. And that multi-year projection will have this year updated to our updated beginning fund balance based on these unaudited actuals I just presented, with our projected ending fund balance for June of 21, and also our financial projections for the next 2 fiscal years, all the way out to June of 23. Yes, that will be a part of the first interim.
So I know that we asked this question in a few board meetings ago. How much savings did we, or how much expenditure did we as a district have because the students were not in school from March? Did we save on the water and electricity?
That particular slide there shows utilities, Ms. Opar, to about 236,000. That is
236.
that is utilities. I would imagine the majority of that savings is directly related to the last 2.5 months of school. That covers water, trash, sewer, and electricity
Okay.
fall into that line. And again, some other line items that didn't occur because the students were not here. It's hard to say what exactly we saved, but we did have some savings. Also in the 4,000s in the unrestricted side, tires, fuel, and oil. I believe that's the majority of that is a direct result that our buses were not out on the road those 2.5 months. Again, in some general maintenance items that were not able to be accomplished in the spring as we did not have our maintenance crews staffed up. So we did have, I would say, at minimum, I'd say about $500,000, but it's hard to put an actual figure. But we did save. But I would like to point out, as this summary, if I can go back to this slide real quick, right here, even with the pandemic and closing our schools and having some savings based on our curtailed operations those last 2.5 months, we overspent our revenue by about $2.2 million. So we still spent more than we received. We just didn't spend as much more because we were able to curtail operations. Is that,
Okay, that
we
is
still
good.
overspent and we
Thank you.
still did reduce our ending fund balance.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, excellent job. Matt told all the principals, be sure to tune in. I'm the presentations today. Kylie, do we have any public comments?
We do.
Good.
We have one. This comment was submitted by Melissa Wetzel. My name is Melissa Wetzel, and I would like to address the unjustifiable closures of schools and the potential mask requirements upon reopening schools as it pertains to COVID-19. I would like to bring up just a few issues with distance learning, although there are many. It is a complete disservice to both children and parents. First, there are so many issues with regards to technology. People are speaking over each other. I have heard profanities in the background when children are not muted. It is intrusive to the household. It is impersonal. Children are not getting the one-on-one assistance that some of them need, not to mention the complete disservice for children with special needs. Secondly, as a parent, the amount of time and work required by me as a teacher's aide should result in compensation. Granted, I love spending time with my children and doing various activities at my discretion as a mother. However, if I'm going to be a teacher's aide, I should be compensated accordingly. School is school and home is home. If schools are going to remain in this distance learning format or reopen with mask requirements, etc., perhaps parents should start to consider homeschooling. Unfortunately, teachers could potentially be out of work if such a trend were to begin. Third, these children are not getting any real social interaction, and believe it or not, many of them miss school. As much as we appreciate our teachers, we need to get schools reopened immediately under the same conditions prior to COVID-19. This is not about blaming the school district. However, the school district and school board of trustees are representatives who do speak on these matters regularly and can request waivers and other things. This is not about accusing the school district and the school board of trustees of not doing these things. This is about being heard by you all, so you, our representatives, can in turn speak for us in meetings with your superiors, etc. This brings me to my final point. Currently, you do not allow public comment at your board meetings in person, by phone, or by video. You only allow an email submission to be read. I already addressed this with Trinae Nelson and emailed all of the board of trustees on this matter. So far, Trinae has been the only one who has given me the common courtesy of a response. I emailed the following. In part, I know that currently the school district is exercising the executive order in 2920, which allows you to hold these meetings virtually, assuming that you meet certain criteria. Are you aware that this is optional, not mandatory? Are you aware that the town of Apple Valley allows public comment where the clerk calls the speakers to make their comment live by phone for their town council meetings? Are you aware that San Bernardino County allows video and in-person public comment at their Board of Supervisors meetings? One of the conditions that should be met to hold these meetings virtually is as follows. 4, gives notice of means by which members of the public may observe the meeting and offer public comment, in each instance where notice or agendas are posted. I would argue that the latter portion of this is not being met, as I am not afforded the opportunity to make my public comment. Someone else will speak for me. They will not represent me as I would represent myself. They will not represent my children in the way that I would. I am without a voice. I am pleading with you to allow public comment in person as the county does. I am no longer a free person in matters pertaining to my own children. I am not even free to speak for them. I will leave you with this as my final thought and hope that you will consider all of this heavily. I have much more to offer and suggest and question, including teacher strikes, lawsuits against the governor, and more, but my time is limited in this meeting. I look forward to your response. Thank you, Melissa Wetzel.
Is that the only?
That's only.
Is that it?
We're under F2 right now, which is Superintendent Comments, and I will just tell you publicly that our county data for Apple Valley Unified School District has continued to decline, which was the trend we were hoping for. The 2-week, 14-day rolling data showed that we were just below the threshold 2 weeks ago. We are now sitting at a place where it is appropriate for us to move forward with a waiver. Our county just last Friday the governor released the new guidelines on how they were going to color code counties. Our county is purple, which is the most at-risk county. However, that said, the waiver process can happen for Apple Valley. There are some requirements that take place in order for us to do that. We have to include stakeholders, which includes both bargaining units and parents. And then we have to also include people like the transportation department, so that they're involved in the discussion, as well as nutrition services and all of those things. Because as we move forward with the waiver, the potential is, one, that we start bringing kids back to in-person instruction under a waiver process, TK through 6th grade only. This does not address high school or 7th and 8th grade. Well, the cabinet sat in on a presentation from the state several weeks back, and the person that was speaking talked about the no moving forward with a waiver based on the ages of the students, because the younger children are not ones that have been typically affected by the virus, nor are they typically the ones that are moving the virus. It is the kids that what they had statistically at that time was 12 and above. Now, I know we're going to have some 6th graders that are 12 years old, but they had to make a decision. And so that is what they gave us as an answer, because we asked the same question.
What about tort protection?
There is no tort protection.
Get sued?
Potentially, that would be true of any situation. So there is currently no tort protection. However, moving forward, this would take us the timeline for any waiver. So just so you understand that this is not a sign a piece of paper and turn it in tomorrow and have a waiver. Once we have consulted with the bargaining units and the stakeholders, meaning the parents, and typically we would include some students in that conversation, probably high school, even though they're not the waiver ones. It would take the county, then Department of Public Health has 14 days to review the current data, what the waiver process looks like, and all of the pieces that we have to submit under the application. Then it goes to the state. It takes an additional up to 3 days for the state to either respond that they support the waiver, or they can say that they don't, or they can actually not respond at all. And at that point, then the Department of Public Health in San Bernardino County can approve the waiver. Okay, so we're talking at least 3 weeks by the time it gets processed. And there has to be some work time. So Dustin has work groups coming together that includes all of the stakeholders that will be necessary. We have survey data from parents that we will actually move forward with and ask for more. We continue to keep our survey open with parents. And if we come off of the purple, so in the middle of this waiver, we have to do a parallel process. If our county becomes red, no longer purple, then it is approximately an additional 14 days before we can ever start looking at returning students to seats. So we're going to explore both pathways. We certainly have some concerns about safety of staff and safety of students, and how we're going to sanitize and make sure that all of the systems are in place. We don't get to ignore the requirement of masks. That is a requirement for any student 4th grade and above, and teachers, and the teachers have to maintain a 6-foot distance. So the work groups will come together, and then Dustin will bring the negotiating teams together to negotiate the effects of whatever the plan is finalized for the waiver. Okay, so I wanted you to be aware of that. If at any time data indicates that it starts going the opposite direction, we certainly will have to adjust and do whatever the state tells us we have to do. We are working in unison with the Lewis Center, because at AAE, we want to make sure that we are discussing our reopening with them as well, because they serve similar demographics and bringing kids back. So know that that's a collaborative process as well. We currently have and I understand distance learning is not ideal. Nobody loves it. It is work, it is different, and people miss having kids on campus. There is no doubt about that. But right now in the process with parents, we have some data back. 70% of our parents feel like it's just right. It's just right. What we're serving them with is just right. On either end of that are the rest, and we will continue to push for satisfaction and support of students. We did have a 2% decline in our current enrollment, and that is pretty much trending across districts throughout the state. In fact, superintendents have been texting me, where are you guys at? How many have you lost? That type of thing. 2%, about 200 kids. And they are out actively talking with those students. We have reopened and actually transitioned a few teachers to independent study so that at school sites where we did not have independent study before, they could offer independent study instead of sending them to HGPA because they are maxed out with their staffing.
Pretty close.
And that's it for me right now. And then Mr. So, yes.
How is Lucerne Valley able to open? And then I know Hesperia Christian is in the way too. Why is
Sure.
there such a discrepancy as the same?
Because we are based on our demographics of our district boundaries. So at the time, 2 weeks ago, actually when Lucerne Valley had applied for their waiver, they had very few cases of community cases within their town boundary. And so that data alone put them below the threshold of 200 cases per 100,000. We were at, the last time I looked for them, when we were at 192.4, they were at 52. So quite a difference in the total community case number, and that's what approves us for a waiver. So when you're at the threshold of right at 200, applying is risky because if it goes up, they won't approve it. And we don't want to put it in and have it denied. We wanted to see the trend return and go down. The county is, our district boundary is different than the town boundary. So there is data on the county website having to do with COVID-19 that addresses approximately 72,000 people. That's the town county community cases. Ours is based on over 80,000 because of our boundaries that are in the county area. So that's why they were allowed. Likewise, Apple Valley Christian has to utilize the community cases, but they also are very small, so they could separate students, and that's part of the waiver process.
And they were denied.
Yeah, they were denied. They applied. Hesperia Christian did, yes.
So Lucerne was denied?
And I will tell you that
Apple Valley.
it's a little
Okay.
bit of a, there's a little bit of a contradiction in the data conversation because we have been told that the private schools are having to go by their community data, and Hesperia's community data has not gone below the threshold. So that the fact that they wavered them, they must have had other things that factored in as well, including, being able to space kids at I don't know where they could put them, but just from that perspective. But they've told us that that's their goal, is not to approve any waivers if the community data is over 200 per. Okay. Mr. So, board comment?
I don't have any, I just wanted the rest of the board to know that we are working together as a board. You know what, Maria and I share, and we talk to other board members in San Bernardino, and we're doing all we can. And so just don't be influenced by comments.
Mr. Bender?
Expedited? I have no comment.
Mr. Raleigh? Ms. Okpara?
I do have a comment. I'm interested in knowing where we are on ethnic studies. I'm also interested in, when I saw the police report, I was a little bit not sure why we had on our police report traffic stops. So I'm not clear why we're still having traffic stops when school wasn't in session in July. So I just want to know why were they out doing traffic stops during our vacation time when school's not in session. The other thing that I'm interested in knowing is what are the possibilities if this continues? What are the possibilities of having this room with a speakerphone so that the parents who want to speak to us directly using a phone can be given a number in a queue and they can speak to us directly through that speakerphone. This was a classroom, so I know it was wired for a phone. It had a phone when it was a classroom. I'm just wondering if we can just set a speakerphone here, turn it on, and let us hear them through their queue, and just let them know that they have 2 minutes to speak, or however minutes the board approves, and they speak to us directly. That will bypass the comment that we just heard. I do know that having them on a video will be a little bit more tricky, but the phone might be an easier route to go so that we can bypass this. Otherwise, I have absolutely nothing. I'm so impressed with what the teachers are able to do in this time. I have actually spoken to parents who were glad about the virtual instruction because they said for the first time they get to know what their kids are doing. It's no longer good. How did school go? And they say good. Parents actually know what that really means. Of course, you will always have people who are not too thrilled about it. But the most important thing is that we need to keep the safety of our staff and our students as our number one priority. That's about it.
Well, thank you, Maria. I was thinking very similar thoughts as you. I will tell you, this has got to be the hardest time for parents and students and our district trying to continue on their educations through such difficult times. I was a teacher for many, many years. Nothing has ever been as detrimental to education as this long time away from their teachers has been. I'm sure the teachers feel just the same way.
Okay, public hearing. We have a public hearing 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. Mr. Schlosser. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board regarding the 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan? Board questions or comments?
No, I had none.
We will now open the public hearing regarding the 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for public comment at
4:29.
4:29 p.m. And due to the streaming process, we will pause for 5 minutes to allow the public to comment. Anyone wishing to address the board are invited to email their comments to avusd_board@avusd.org. And then while we're pausing for the 5 minutes, Mr. Schlosser is going to talk to you a little bit about the plan.
First, I'll pause and see if there are any public comments that have come in regarding the learning, the LCAP. We'll check again at the end of the 5-minute period. Okay, so just a brief outline. I know you've seen the document. I just wanted to make sure we highlight a couple of things that are important for this plan. One, the first section of the plan is stakeholder engagement. I just want you to know this plan comes about through a process of gathering information from a variety of stakeholders in the following ways. One, the aforementioned survey. Trinae talked about the fact that we have incredible information from our parents. In fact, the most recent survey she referenced had a really quick response of almost 1,000 parents. Again, not everyone is, there's outliers, and we feel that's important to hear from, but we did get good data back. And that's in addition, of course, to the 13,000 responses we had to the previous 2 surveys. Then we had on August 17th, a district advisory committee made up of our members of our normal district advisory from every school site. Made reference to that last time we talked. And then on August 19th, we met with our district English language advisory committee. We took questions from those groups. They had outstanding questions. We are required by law to answer and post the answers to those questions on our website, which we will do. We're in the final stages of getting translations to those. The questions were these. There were questions about, for example, they noticed that in our LCAP, there's no mention of our police department. We talked about that in here. That is not one of the items in our LCAP at this point. However, they wanted to make sure that that was still a priority of the district, and we were able to answer that question. There are questions about how parents can get information about how to use a Chromebook. There are questions about how to get lists of class assignments. Excellent questions that help us to know what parents need to make this work. Second section of the plan has to do with in-person learning. Well, of course, for us, hard question to answer because we're not doing it right now. So we had to have a contingent response. So it says, here's based on the CDC guidelines, what we would do, but we made clear to say that whatever we do will be negotiated, as is mentioned, with bargaining units and consultation with bargaining units and bring in stakeholders. And so that's critical to know. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then of course, the section on distance learning where we highlight all the training that's happened, all the devices distributed, and what's gone on to make it happen, to make this distance learning process work, including people who have had to change roles and
Yes, don't
responsibilities.
prepare.
There's a pupil learning loss section, which talks about how we will be addressing what you so rightly notice is the impact to students and how we'll be measuring that. So that's addressed in the plan. And then finally, mental health and social emotional learning. And you'll see even in this board meeting, on one of the consent items is about Care Solace. This is a attempt by us to contract with an agency that will help connect families to mental health services as one of the measures we are putting into place so that they can have expanded services. So that's just a quick highlight of what's in the plan. Also, all the other LCAP items are kind of tucked in there and summarized because that's the only space they gave us to work. So you can tell the state had to build this quickly. And then they built it, we drafted it, we posted it to the website, then they sent out guidance for how to write it. And so it's in draft format now. We await public comment and input. We will make adjustments and bring it back to you on the 24th for any other feedback or for a final adoption rather on the 24th of September. Then by the 30th of September, it must be turned into the county and submitted to them.
Okay. Do we have any public comments, Kylie?
Not at this time.
Okay. Hearing no further public comment, we now close the public hearing for the 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. It was opened at 4:25 and closed at
429.
4:29. Oh, thank you. And it's closing at
4:34.
We have a second public hearing, and during that 5-minute break, we're going to let the board take a quick 5-minute break while we're waiting for that to come in. So we're going to start the public hearing, pupil textbook and instructional materials. Pause for just a minute. Let me
Let's
get it done.
open.
And instructional material compliance K-12 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Schlosser, under the Ed Code 60119 and CCR Title 5, Section 9531C, requires the governing board of any local agency receiving instructional materials funds from any state source to hold a public hearing on the sufficiency of textbooks or instructional materials by the end of the 8th week of school. Are there any questions or comments from board members or of the board regarding the pupil textbook and instructional materials compliance K-12 2020-2021 school year? Any board questions?
Yes, will that include ethnic books for this school year, or are we waiting for next school year?
I can answer that. That will include, at this time, anything that is adopted as the core adoption, which
Okay.
was already approved. So at this time, no new adoptions are a part of it. Only anything that was adopted and turned into Williams for sufficiency
For the Williams,
prior.
okay, for
Okay.
the Williams lawsuit, that's what we're talking about.
That's right.
That's one
Yeah.
component of
Okay,
it.
good, okay, yeah, no questions.
We're going to open the public hearing regarding the pupil textbook and instructional materials compliance K-12 2020 school year for public comment at
4:35.
4:35. And we'll, due to streaming process, we will pause for 5 minutes to allow the public comment to come in. Those wishing to address the board are invited to email their comments to AVUSD_board@avusd.org. So we're going to pause for 5 minutes, and you may take a break while we do that.
Yeah, it's a
Look,
Kylie, do we have any public comments?
We do not at this time.
Okay. Hearing no further public comment, I now close the public hearing for pupil textbook and instructional materials compliance K-12 2020-2021 school year. And the time opened at 4:35 and will close at 4:42. Action session. It is recommended the Board of Trustees discuss and take action on the following items. Approve the certificated and classified personnel actions as listed. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay,
All those
Ms.
in favor?
Okpara?
Aye. Thank you.
Anybody opposed? 5-0. Approve the request of leaves as noted. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Bender? Mr. So?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
No.
5-0. Consent agenda. It is recommended the Board of Trustees consider approving a number of agenda items as a consent list. Consent items are routine in nature and can be enacted in one motion without further discussion. This procedure conserves meeting time for a full discussion of significant issues. Consent items to be approved in one motion. Items 1 through 22. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Mr. So? Mr. Bender?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Motion carries. And then any other public comments, Kylie?
We have not received any.
Okay. I just want to acknowledge that Monday is Labor Day and people are working hard in this system. So I think more than ever, they're going to appreciate just even one day to take a little bit of a break. I appreciated seeing the student reports in video format this time. It's so good to see their faces. And then just finally, I would like to, I asked Ms. Okpara if I could respond to the question about the police and the traffic pullover. In our system, we do have police patrolling pretty much year round. We had food delivery and meals and things like that happening in the district. And so if they are out in their vehicle and there is a traffic infraction that happens in front of them, under their certification, they are required to respond. They cannot ignore it. And so I looked at the report in July, of the 7 pullovers, only 1 resulted in a citation. They were warnings in most situations.
That's like the grand jury report they cited for the wrote a ticket in Victorville, but our cop was in a car and a car ran through the red light on a bus stop.
Yeah, so yeah, whenever there's safety, they are required to, or they're in trouble otherwise. So, and then any other board comments, Mr. So?
I don't have any.
Mr. Bender? Mr. Raleigh?
Just briefly, I know when we adjourned, I like to adjourn the meeting in memory of Tyler Shelton, who was, obviously, everybody knows he was a student that got killed, tragically killed. And it's really disheartening to see these young guys that are
That's right.
life and doing the right thing. But,
He was a good football player, he was a good employee at Stater Brothers too.
yeah,
He always had a smile.
I actually remember him. So anyway, when we get to that. we can-
Okay, good. Mr. Selby.
Absolutely. Ms. Okpara?
None.
No.
Mrs. Davis? No. There's no reason to continue closed session. And so I'm going to have Kylie go ahead and pass out the signing of the documents. And then we'll take a motion to adjourn, but we'll take a moment of silence for Tyler Shelton. Okay.
Yep.
Our condolences go out to his family. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I second it.
Everybody. Can I have a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Kylie has a few things for you.